Special episode for you today. We have Julia Constance, who is back from her first episode where she talked about her career. Today, she's talking about what she did for her PhD, because yes, we are now talking to Dr. Julia Constance. She has been able to attain her PhD. She's talking about her experience with that, but also talking about what she's been up to and what she did over the PhD and where she worked, because where she worked was really, really interesting. And you can catch a glimpse of what environment she's working in and the crocodiles that are there. In the latest episode of Searching for Lost Sharks, we're going to be able to find out all about that. It's quite the story, and let's start the show. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. I'm your co-host, Andrew Lewin, here with my co-host, Dr. David Ebert. Dave, are you ready? This is a really special episode, not only because we are announcing that Julia, on the episode officially, that Julia is Dr. Julia Constance, but you actually got to visit Julia in her study environment when you started to do your Searching for Lost Sharks episode, the latest one that's out on Lost Shark Guy YouTube channel. How exciting is this to not only see Julia get her PhD, but to be able to talk about the environment, and you got to experience what kind of environment she was working in?
Yeah, no, it was great. It was really awesome. And yeah, I hope everybody checks out the episode Lost and Found, the river shark story, when the latest episode of Searching for Lost Sharks on my YouTube channel at Lost Shark Guy. Anyway, no, it was amazing. Julia was one of those young early career researchers, I featured in this series here, and we went out to look for the river sharks. And it was a story, as I lay out a little more in the detail stuff, but it was really these river sharks kind of helped lay the foundation for the shark conservation back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And it's a story. Sarah Fowler has involved Sarah Fowler and Leonard Campagno and others. But it really was the group of sharks that laid the foundation for this. And it was great to work with Julia, because she's one of those explorers who likes to go out and look for little known or basically lost sharks out there. And this was just a perfect episode to have her come back on, talk about her PhD, where she's at now, where she's going, and talk about the episode, and which is really wonderful. And I had a chance to see Julia just recently at the Sharks International Conference in Sri Lanka, so that was kind of good to catch up with her in person.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit about that as well, I'm sure, today.
Absolutely. We definitely asked about Sharks International because, it was her first Sharks International, and something that I think she really enjoyed, and we got to hear her feedback on that. So I think it's great. We got to hear a bunch of stuff. We're going to hear about it right now. Here's the interview with Dr. Julia Constance. Enjoy, and we will talk to you after. Hey, Julia, welcome back to the Beyond Jaws podcast. Are you ready to continue our conversation about sharks?
I'm so ready.
All right, right on.
Cool. Well, welcome to the Beyond Jaws podcast, where today we have a terrific returning guest. We have Dr. Julia Constance, who's a conservation biologist based in Charles Darwin University in Darwin, Australia, which is way up in the far northern territories there. Julia was on the podcast back in January of 2024 as a PhD candidate, and at the time she talked about the extinction of the Java stingaree, which was the first documented extinction of a marine species, and it's listed on the IUCN Red List as being extinct, which I'd encourage you please to check out that episode. It's extremely fascinating. Well, since we last spoke with Julia, she's completed her PhD on the natural mortality and movement ecology of the Northern Territory's glyphus, or river shark species, for her PhD. She covered both the speartooth river shark, as well as the northern river shark, as well as exploring, looking at the long-term movements and the environmental drivers of these movements for each species in the river systems of the Northern Territory. It was very cutting-edge stuff, because it's actually fascinating information. So Julia also just recently returned from the Sharks International Conference, where I also attended out in Colombo in Sri Lanka. And I also mentioned that Julia is one of the featured researchers on the YouTube documentary series Searching for Lost Sharks, Extinct or Alive, on my YouTube channel at Lost Shark Guy. Please check it out, and you find out more about her research on the episode there. And for that, Julia, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me again.
Great.
You bet. Congratulations on becoming.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So glad it's over.
Yeah. So how does it feel now to be doctor?
It's really good. I submitted in May 2025, and then I only just actually officially graduated last month. So it's kind of been a long journey, drawn out process. But now, like, having the actual graduation ceremony, it's like, whew, it's actually done. Yeah. It's actually over.
Is it similar to here in North America, where you're, like when you do a PhD, you do a defense in front of your committee and in front of the public, and then they ask you questions and so forth, and then you submit your final thesis after that?
So most universities in Australia, it is like that, but my university, there is no defense. I opted to do a presentation of my final results because I kind of think that that's kind of an important thing to do when you've just done 3 years of research on this topic. So I did opt to do a seminar to the public.
Awesome.
But then, essentially they just send your thesis out to reviewers, and then you get revision comments back. You revise your thesis, and then the university looks whether or not to accept it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Right on.
Cool. So before we get a little further here, why don't you just remind everyone, like a little bit of your background, Julia? Where are you from in Australia, and how'd you wind up in Darwin?
So I'm originally from northwest New South Wales. So I actually grew up on a farm growing crops like sunflowers and wheat until I was 18. And then I moved down to southern New South Wales because I wanted to be a vet at the time. And then I decided that I really wanted to stay working with wildlife instead of being a vet. And so then I moved to Wollongong, which is just south of Sydney, and did conservation biology as a degree. And then after that, I was kind of looking at what to do, but I knew that I wanted to move to Northern Australia. Ended up getting offered my honours here in Darwin. So I moved here. I was only supposed to be here for a year, but 5 years later, I'm still here. Still love it. See what happens next.
Yeah, it happens that way sometimes. So, good. Well, that's good. That's good. That's good with your stuff there. So, so now that obviously you've been working, why don't you tell us a little bit about your study? A little more detail of what you did with the river sharks?
So essentially, my research was using a very long established acoustic telemetry data set. So my supervisor, Peter Kine, set up an acoustic receiver array back in 2013 in a series of river systems here in the Northern Territory. And they tagged, at the time, around 200 northern river sharks and speartooth sharks. And so I had, for some of the animals, up to 10 years of tracking data that I then took over the management of the acoustic receiver array. So I had this huge data set that I could then look at things like movement ecology for each species and each size class and each location and each season. And then also look at just the movements that these sharks were taking over long-term periods and what were the potential drivers of these. And then during my PhD, I also got to go and just survey a new river system and found a new population of the speartooth shark as well. It was all very fun.
Now, these sharks...
Fun and amazing. Like, finding a new population. That's phenomenal. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yes, it was definitely the highlight.
Now these, so people understand that even though they're called river sharks, and this was kind of a little bit new to me, and just so everyone knows, I went there and I went out with Julia and Pete and did some tagging back in 2024, almost 2 years ago. Yeah. It was a highlight experience for me, if you can catch the episode with Julia and I, because my advisor, Leonard Capani, had been obsessed with river sharks back in the 1980s, so I kind of got indoctrinated early on. It was really cool for me to actually see these things. But when you kind of started working out there, let me back up. When they call them river sharks, they're not really river sharks in terms of like freshwater river. They're more like a saline or estuarine environment. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we call them euryhaline species, which means that they can occur anywhere from freshwater all the way through to marine, and they do undertake part of their life history in non-marine environments. So essentially for these species, the mums are coming into the river systems to give birth. The pups are then spending most of their juvenile years, even until they're adults, in the river systems, and then they're moving out into the marine systems. So in the early days of river shark research, they were considered a freshwater species, so similar to the freshwater obligate rays in South America. So we couldn't find them for a very long time because we were looking in the wrong spots. Because they were early considered just completely freshwater. Now they do go into completely freshwater, but most of the time they're more in the brackish water.
And they don't really move outside into the true marine environment very much either, do they? So once they are matured, they move out of the river systems. My tracking data found that there was speartooth sharks staying in river systems until they were 16, 17 years old.
so staying a lot later than we thought that they would. But then they move out into the marine system, and from there we have no idea where they go because we've never tracked these animals in the marine system. So there was animals that would disappear for years at a time and just pop into the mouths of different river systems. So they are staying in the marine waters, but where they go and what kind of marine habitats they use, we still don't know as adults.
Wow, so they don't, and they rarely catch them in the marine environment. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're rarely recorded. I wonder if it's more of a identification issue. Potentially because of the high second dorsal fin, people may be thinking that they're lemon sharks when they're in the marine systems. I think it's still, maybe they're being caught, maybe they're not, but I think it's more of an identification issue.
Yeah, so really almost like a next step in this whole study, would be actually to see what they're doing in the marine environment.
Yeah, that would be the dream for me. I did apply for some funding during my PhD to get some satellite tags going to track the adults, but that would be the dream next step if I was to find something.
And how difficult do you think it'd be to try to catch them in the marine environment?
I think it's a lot harder when you're in the river systems. There's obviously much fewer species that you're going to interact with, so your chances of catching the river sharks that you're targeting is a lot higher. But then in the marine system, you've got all of these other species that you're potentially going to be catching as bycatch that are going to be much more common. So yeah, definitely targeting them in the marine system is going to be a lot more challenging.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of fascinating that they live in such a narrow, at least the early stage of their life history, they live in such a narrow environment that if that habitat's impacted, it would really impact basically the entire species, correct?
Yeah. So absolutely, completely niche kind of habitat that they're going for. And their movements are completely different to other species that are occurring in these kinds of habitats. So they're really weird in that they've just pushed themselves into these really narrow spaces. And as you say, if we start to mess with these river systems, start to change their habitat, they're not really going to have anywhere to go. And there's not a lot of movement between rivers. So we lose a population in one river, then they're probably going to not come back.
That's gone. And like how many river systems? They're up to like 12 now, river systems for these sharks?
I wouldn't be able to tell you off the top of my head. Essentially, they're not found in every river system, as you say. I wouldn't be able to tell you the count of it off the top of my head, but yeah, certainly less than 20 river systems.
Less than 20 river systems. It's all strictly up in the Northern Territory, pretty much.
So the speartooth shark is found in one river system in Queensland, and then they're found across the Northern Territory and into Western Australia. And then the northern river shark is found just in the Northern Territory in Western Australia. And then both species are also found in southern Papua New Guinea as well.
Okay. And do the species do you find them co-occurring in the same river system?
So they do co-occur in some river systems. Some river systems only have the one species. But where they do co-occur, you'll generally find that there's a slightly more populous species in that river system.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, in the Adelaide River where we went fishing, the more dominant species there is the speartooth shark.
Speartooth, and some of the ones, some of the other ones, are the northern speartooth dominant, and some of the other ones.
Yeah. So the northern river shark is the more dominant species in the South Alligator River, for example.
Okay. I mean, it's kind of fascinating to me in that these things are they have such a narrow habitat. It reminds me a little bit of like the soft fish, which, use mangroves in a coastal area, and in a lot of areas their habitat's just been destroyed. And so which impacts their life cycle. And so you got this thing. I mean, in Australia, they're probably the northern speartooth and the speartooth are probably in pretty good shape because it's in Australia. But when you go to like, say, Papua New Guinea or some of the other countries that say don't have as stringent a conservation regulations, do you kind of concerned that they might be impacted more? Yeah,
so Northern Australia is definitely a really good area for these kinds of threatened species. We still have concerns for these species. For example, in the Northern Territory, there's a lot of water resource development that the government is wanting to do. So, for example, to increase the amount of agriculture and mining that happens in the Northern Territory. So, for example, the Adelaide River, which is the speartooth shark's most important river system in the world, largest population of speartooth sharks globally there. They're essentially wanting to capture the freshwater flows that occur there during the wet season and store them offstream in an offstream water storage unit. So essentially that's going to change the dynamics of the flow of that river, and that could potentially impact the movements of these species, but it's also going to cause cascading effects. So, for example, a lot of the fish species that the speartooth shark and the northern river shark are going to be consuming in that river system, their life cycles are highly, highly dependent on that freshwater flow. So as soon as we impact those species, we then also impact the prey species of our river sharks as well. So at the moment, certainly compared to, for example, the Ganges river shark in the rest of Asia, our river sharks in Australia are doing really well. But we are looking at potential concerns.
So outside Australia, though, really Papua New Guinea is the only place you find either of these species. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That we know of.
So these two species that I worked on, they're endemic to northern Australia and southern Papua New Guinea.
So now the Ganges shark, which I know you didn't work on, but you and I had an opportunity to see when we were in Jakarta. That's one that. How would you characterize that one as being critically endangered, on its way to potentially extinct?
Yes. So that species is listed as critically endangered. Very, very rare to find records of it still occurring throughout its range. And we pretty much know nothing about it. We draw a lot of conclusions about potentially its life history and things from our northern Australian species. But it's one of those things that it's so hard to find because it's so, so, so rare and so threatened now that I hold a lot of concerns for it personally.
Yeah. And there's there's absolutely no records of it in Australia at all. It's just, it doesn't get there. Okay. Yeah. That's the one I really think that really has, from all the stuff I've known over the years, talking with Leonard Campagno and then talking to you and Pete and Fahmy, that seems to be the one that's really of a lot of concern, because where it used to range from and to now, it's just gone down quite a bit in terms of its distribution and everything So, so I got to ask you, because I know it was a fascination for me working in a habitat. And some of the unforeseen things is saltwater crocodiles. People think they go out to and other environments they're working around. Just to set the story up here for you, and I'll turn it over to you, Julia. But so when you go out there, you're working with sharks, and you already have people realize that's kind of a known hazard, especially if you're working with large toothy sharks. But when you get out there and you start working with large saltwater crocodiles, and I'm talking like 5 meters or more. It doesn't have to be 5 meters; it could be 2 meters. So, Julia, would you tell everybody out here what that's like?
Look, it's a very, very different. It's a really, really different environment that I work on here. So, for example, these river sharks, their favorite water is chocolate milk colored, muddy, turbid water, and pretty much their ideal habitats is always overlapping with saltwater crocodiles. As Dave said, this is a really, really big species. The biggest recorded saltwater crocodile was 6.14 meters. So we're talking like huge. And they're really, really aggressive. Yeah. And so generally, when I'm fishing for sharks, for example, I've got to be you don't want to be drawing too much attention to what you're doing, because these saltwater crocodiles are intrinsically just very, very curious. So, for example, if I'm fighting a freshwater whipray for a very long time, you will see crocodiles popping up all over the place, having a look and starting to come closer and be like, what are you doing over there? But yeah, I've definitely had...
Let me ask you this, Joe. Sorry to interrupt, because like when you said I have to be quiet, like, is it like you mentioned after, is it like in terms of how you fish, it's like a rod and reel of how you catch these sharks, right?
Yeah. That's
what you mean by it can't be thrashing around. You got to be quiet in that case, but like, or is it quiet as in just even talking, you have to kind of whisper around because they know you're in there?
So
Okay, I just want to make sure. Like, how good are these crocs?
As much as these crocodiles are extremely dangerous, they are still wary of people. So in the 1970s in Northern Australia, we got down to 3,000 saltwater crocodiles across all of Northern Australia because we were absolutely shooting them almost to extinction.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of the crocodiles that survived that period are still going because they're very long-lived. So there is like this intrinsic fear of people, and it's probably a memory of being shot at as well. So these crocodiles are generally not too cheeky unless you've had, recreational fishers trying to feed them and do silly things like that. So generally you're not having to be too concerned about them. It's more of like you've just got to be really watching what's happening around you, and paying attention, not putting your hands in the water. And it's more of just a croc awareness, croc safety practice.
And that includes, I can tell you, just to set this story up, because Julia, we spent time in Northern Australia, and then Julia and I went to Timor-Leste, which we'll touch on in just a moment, which has nothing to do with river sharks there. But when they went out there, because this was in Australia, they go over the safety protocol for being on the river, or just launching the boat even to go out with these saltwater crocodiles. Like, you don't walk down to the dock, you wait on the boat. You're always looking around because these things are really sneaky as well. They can like pop up like pretty close to you. And like, you don't sit at the edge of the boat when you go out in the river, because one of them could literally lunge out of the water and snatch you right off the boat pretty quickly. And so you go over all of this stuff, all of this protocol and stuff, which is good. It's a good safety measure. Someone like me, I've had a little experience in Africa with crocodiles, but this was kind of very different setting. So you go through, which is very good. You have all these protocols and stuff. When Julia and I went to Timor-Leste, you don't have any such protocols, and there's freaking saltwater crocodiles everywhere in Timor-Leste, to where you don't step off the road at all because you might get snacked. You might become a snack for a saltwater crocodile there, and there's plenty of them there. So anyway,
yeah, I think that's the thing about the Northern Territory is we have the largest saltwater crocodile population on the planet. We're up to about 100,000 saltwater crocodiles, over 2 meters long, just in the Northern Territory. So it's a massive population, but we have very, very few deaths. It's like less than one person per year, if that. So I think that the thing about here is that we've just had this just crocodile safety just drummed into us, and it's just how we behave now. Like for me, when I go and visit my family on the east coast of Australia, I'll see my niece standing next to a river system, and I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you standing so close to the water? But it just becomes this like inherent part of how you behave. But yeah, like even just working with the crocodiles, you look at other people that have done acoustic telemetry research elsewhere in the world, and they get to dive into this crystal clear blue water and just go and retrieve their acoustic receivers. For me, as I said, the water is like chocolate milk colored. There's crocodiles. So what I had to do to retrieve my acoustic receivers was actually just throw a hook over the side of the boat and turn around in circles over your location, potentially for hours, depending on how buried it's become after the last wet season. So it really just changes your whole practice and the whole way that you do science dealing with these animals.
When you tell, even you mentioned it, like a lot of people, when you see them studying sharks, they're in crystal clear waters. It's beautiful. They can dive in and everything. You had the opposite because of this chocolate milk kind of water, this muddy kind of water. When you describe to people what you do, like non-scientists, even other scientists, I guess, when you describe to people what to do they just be like, why would you choose to study something like that in an area where you're not in crystal blue waters? Like, what is it about these river sharks that makes it so interesting for you to, put yourself in a system where you're probably more apt to be in danger, or once false move, like if you're not paying attention, could put you in some sort of harm, and you're working in like chocolatey milk kind of water. Like, what is it that makes you want to do that?
I find it absolutely fascinating, and I think that the thing about working here is that it's like literally nowhere else on the planet. The places that I get to go and work are places that very, very, very few people in the world are ever going to be able to visit, especially in the more remote locations.
Yeah.
And these areas have been almost untouched. So like everywhere else, for example, where the Ganges river shark is, for example, have been completely modified, completely overfished, completely impacted by human beings. But I'm going to river systems where you might have 50 people that go and visit there to go fishing recreationally in a year. And there's no commercial fishing in river systems in the Northern Territory. Some river systems they set up just outside the mouth. But essentially these systems are like nowhere else in the world. And so it's kind of, when people ask me about what I do, I can kind of give them an insight about systems that they're never going to get to experience, and that very few people ever do get to experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like I always tell people, ask me about like looking for lost sharks, and I just tell them like it's going where most people won't go, and like where Julia works, I can affirm that like a lot of people won't go to the areas where she's working because it's not. I don't want to say it's not pleasant. I thought it was kind of cool myself, but
I love it. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, you get into it and you get really excited about it, but a lot of people won't go there just because it's not a real pleasant area to have to go work, and you got wildlife there that might eat you. And
you've definitely got to be a certain type of person. So, for example, one of the places that I love to work, I'm literally just camping on a floodplain. There's no shade, there's no toilets. I'm usually the only woman around, and it's one of my favorite places in the whole world. And people are like, "That place isn't very nice," and I'm like, I could not like. It's a place that I fly over. I flew over it on Friday last week, and I'm like there, and I'm like, oh, I just want to be there.
Yeah.
So I guess you've got to be a certain type of person as well.
100%. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely takes a certain personality to be able to do that. And I just got one more thing on the crocodiles is Julia mentioned you have how many attacks you have maybe a year in the Northern Territory?
Less than one. There's very
less
few.
Than one. And again, I contrast that when we went to Timor-Leste, and like I think every village we went to, Julia, like somebody got taken out like in the last few days or last week, or I mean, every village had a story about somebody just getting whacked within a few days, and it was just you ask them like how many people get taken a year by the crocodiles, and they're like, well, a lot. But there's no number. They just say a lot of people, and but they just live like. Go ahead.
I think it's the way that people are living as well. Like in the Northern Territory, we're privileged enough to not have to come down to the river system to have a shower or wash our clothes and things like that.
Yeah.
So that puts us inherently in a safer position.
Yeah, and it's kind of a spiritual animal too in Timor-Leste, the saltwater crocodiles as well. So
same for some of our Aboriginal communities here in the Territory.
Oh yeah. Well, how about let me ask you some like okay, so you're up there doing the river sharks and stuff. Did you ever come across a sawfish very often?
I never saw a sawfish during my actual research, so just me being very unlucky. I'm pretty sure that one swam past us one day because the person that I was with saw some very shark-like ray fins way upstream. So they're definitely around, but I've never encountered them during my research. But they're kind of usually kind of more upstream than the river sharks, and they're doing kind of different behaviors. So for example, the river sharks, the way that they move is completely unlike the rest of the euryhaline species in Northern Australia. So for example, in the wet season, our river sharks are moving all the way out to the river mouth when we have our big freshwater flows coming down the river, and they're kind of hanging around the river mouth for most of the wet season. But then we have our bull sharks, the large tooth sawfish, the freshwater whipprays. They actually go further upstream, and they use the wetlands, and they use all of that highly productive wet season floodplains to feed. So the river sharks are kind of just their own thing that do their own thing, and they're completely different to the way that the other species move.
That's fat. And the bull sharks go up river too. Cause the young ones, they birth up the rivers, or the young ones just swim up there?
Yeah, so I think that the bull sharks are pupping around the river mouth, so roughly in the same area as the river sharks. But then they're using that, so they pup just before the wet season here, and they're using that wet season to extend further and further upstream, pretty much as far as they can go. So in the Roper River, for example, they've been recorded to at least 300 kilometres upstream, and they will go absolutely right up as far as they can go.
Do you have you got any? You're probably a little beyond what you did in your study, but do you have any feel for like how do all these things interact with you got the bull sharks, you got the river sharks, you got the sawfish up there, and you got freshwater stingrays going up there too?
Yeah, so I think that the freshwater whiprays aren't really interacting too much with the sharks. I've caught a couple of freshwater whiprays that have got scars that look like crocodile bites, but I've never seen one with shark bite. Sawfish I can't really speak too much to because I haven't interacted with them very much. Yeah. But then certainly when you're catching river sharks, it's really interesting. 1 year there will be absolutely no bull sharks where you're catching river sharks, but then the next year you'll have bull sharks just absolutely mixed in, and you don't know what kind of is driving this change. So generally we consider that the bull sharks are not really going to be overlapping too much with the river sharks, probably except for that early pupping season when they've just all been put in the same location. But generally we consider that the bull sharks are going to be upstream further and not really overlapping. And then the two river shark species will be in the same overlapping spot. But certainly when you're fishing for sharks, you catch a lot of sharks in this area that have bite marks from other sharks. So we obviously got 2, potentially 3 species that are all occurring in quite a narrow habitat. And so, of course, we're going to have overlapping bitey people that want to bite each other. So you can catch some sharks that have some pretty crazy injuries.
Yeah. Is there any evidence? I've seen a few video clips of like crocodiles with bull sharks. Any evidence of like them? I'm sure it happens, but any evidence that you've seen of them eating river sharks?
I've never seen a river shark be eaten by croc, and all of the pictures that I've seen of the crocodiles taking sharks has been a bull shark.
Really?
But I'm sure that it happens. Essentially, a shark is going to be a lot faster than a crocodile, and having worked with crocodiles, they are just inherently lazy. But if a shark happens to just swim right past the jaws of a crocodile, it's going to absolutely grab it. So that's generally what happens there.
Cause those crocs are pretty quick, especially short distances. They can lunge, and they can lunge. Go on, if anybody wants to find out, just go on. There's a number of websites you can go to and just get an idea how much these crocodiles can lunge. It's pretty impressive. Otherwise you just see them kind of laying on the riverbanks doing nothing, just laying there and stuff. But they can lunge.
And if something swims in distance of its jaws, the way that it can swing its head around and just grab things so quickly is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, the reflexes are amazing. Eh?
It's pretty incredible there. So that, obviously it's fascinating to hear in your story because I just want to emphasize, like, Julia's doing something like you said earlier. She's working in an area on a species that most people won't go out and work in those areas and stuff. And especially if you're a young person looking for something to do, you want to make a mark for yourself early on. Kind of like what Julia's done. Just find something that nobody's looking at, and often in an area that nobody else is willing to go to, and you'll find that's where you can have a chance where you can do some pretty cutting edge and new research on something, again, like the river sharks and stuff that nobody really knows much about. And so anyway, just something for young people who are starting out looking for something to do. Because if you go out and do another white shark study, literally, like, you're going to have to be the 1,001st white shark researcher out there. There's plenty of people there. And you're like, the chance you're going to do something really innovative as a grad student is much lower than if you find something like Julia did. And she came on. She actually was on before she worked on the Java stingery, and I'd ask her for an update on that, but there's nothing really to update because it's pretty much gone. Actually, on our journey when I was with her, we went to Jakarta and looked around, and your kind of impression is that the habitat for that thing's pretty much gone.
Yeah, I think I was 100% certain before I went to Jakarta that this thing was gone. So when I did most of this research on the Java stingery, it was during COVID, so I couldn't go and travel. And so when we went to Jakarta, it was the first time that I'd actually been and seen the habitat of the Java stingery, and just seeing the place in person, even though I knew what kind of state it was probably in, I was just like, if I was sure before, I'm like 150% sure now, because even just the color of the water, the pollution there, just the number of people, the amount of fishing, the fishing intensity, it was coming from the Northern Territory. It was just something like you have to see to believe. It was crazy.
Yeah. That's too bad.
And it's the thing about it, and just to emphasize, We only know the Java stingaree from one specimen collected in 1862 that was in a museum collection in Europe. If it wasn't for that museum collection, we'd have no idea this thing ever even existed. And so that's I guess another plug for museum collections. Why the importance of having those things? Because otherwise, who knows how many species may have disappeared because there was no specimens to document that it even occurred. And also with the Java stingaree, the fact the habitat disappeared, kind of gives you kind of a foreshadowing of things like with the river sharks, if the habitat's impacted, sawfish, as we mentioned, and a number of other species. And since we're on these rare and extinct and potentially extinct species, I got to ask you about your tattoo on your arm, on the Red Sea torpedo.
Yes, I got the Red Sea torpedo tattooed last year.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us about that one?
So the Red Sea torpedo is another species that I worked on when I was working on the Java stingaree. So for my honours project, I was looking at the extinction risk of really rare species that are only known from museum specimens. So the Red Sea torpedo, there was only 3 specimens of this species caught in 1897, just off Yemen in the Red Sea. And it's never been seen again. But because we haven't been able to survey that region, we still don't know whether it's there or whether it's not, because obviously there's so much conflict in that region that people generally can't really put too much effort into surveys for a little known torpedo ray. So It's kind of one of those species that I'm like, oh, one day I really, really, really want to go find it, or at least go do surveys and see if it's around or not.
See if it's, yeah. So that's another one. So you're really into these little known, potentially extinct species.
Yeah, I like these odd things that nobody else is thinking about. And as you were saying before, there are so many species that we don't know pretty much anything about. I did a review as part of my PhD on all of the euryhaline and estuarine species of sharks and rays, and there are so many of them that are just completely so poorly known that we can't do any kind of management for them. So much space.
So is that in the future, like now that you've got your PhD and you have obviously have an interest in looking at these little known species, is that what you would like to concentrate in the future, like continue to sort of look for these species, describe them, discover new populations? Is that where your research topics are headed?
Yeah, that's what I would really ideally like to be doing. So there's so much technology and there's so much cool things that you can do with species, but I really kind of want to go back to basics of figuring out what things are where, what are their life history traits, what is all of that kind of basic information that we need to just start managing them in the first place and just start understanding them in the first place so that we can actually protect them. That's essentially where I'd like to go. Whether or not I find some funding, that's a different question.
We could have a whole episode on this, and trust me, when Julie and I were traveling with Adriana and Naya, we got an earful and heard an earful from me on the whole thing. Like, good luck, but on that, you just have
it's so hard, and I think that people are forgetting about that. This kind of more basic, less exciting research is really, really important because there's so many like really cool, fun things that we can be doing, and it seems to be where the funding is kind of going.
Do you have one species that if you had, say, funding wasn't a limitation or something, is there one species you'd like to try to go find?
The Red Sea torpedo, for sure.
I
think they're so interesting. All of the torpedoes, because they're so poorly known, like as you know, Dave, the taxonomy is so poorly resolved as well. Like I'm really interested in the taxonomy of these things too.
Yeah, that's really good. Exciting to hear you have the stuff. And so that's kind of cool. Red Sea torpedo. That's what I have to look at. But like you said, it's a conflict zone, so I don't know how much we could really do much there right now on it and stuff.
Yeah.
So now you're done and everything. You're out kind of like you're working a couple different jobs. And you're out looking for employment now. Do you want to make any kind of a plea or grovel to potential employers?
Yeah, I'm just out in the world by myself now. Look, I am really, really in a position where I really want to stay in the Northern Territory and do research here. So if anyone knows of any kind of funding opportunities that I could base myself with here, that would be awesome. But also, if anyone wants to work on torpedo-ish things too, we could totally collaborate.
That's awesome. Now, how would that work? Like, can I ask, you mentioned a couple times if I can get funding. Like, are you working out of the university right now, or in said jobs?
Yeah, so at the moment I've got two casual positions that aren't related to my own research. So one of them is a research academic position, but that's on, I'm actually doing freshwater invertebrates. And then cool. I'm also managing my college's assets, so our vessels, our field gear, and all of that kind of thing,
cool.
and doing management of systems and safety inductions and things like that. So
gotcha.
Yeah, really good for experience and learning new skills and things like that. And then applying for postdocs and things like that as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So like the postdoc, that would be part of the fund. Like if you got funding, it'd be a postdoc at a specific university, hopefully in the same area.
Yeah.
So ideally I would find my own kind of grant that would cover a salary for me, and then I could kind of design my own postdoctoral research. But there is a place in Darwin that has had a couple of not so much sharky positions come up, but I could potentially divert them in that direction maybe in a couple of years. So
okay. I like the plan.
Yeah.
Right on.
Well, sometimes you have to go on these circuitous directions, circle around to get where you want to go. I mean, I've certainly done it. I think, Andrew, almost everybody we've had in the show, including yourself, we've had to go off on these tangents, let's say, to eventually get back to doing what we want to do. But I think if you learn skills and learn stuff along the way, it all helps later on.
I did science communication for 16 years before I got a job in science communication on my own before I got a job. Hopefully it won't take you that long, but that's the patience that I had on
Look, I think it's one of those careers where people don't realize how hard it is. You know, you do all of this work to get yourself into this position, but then you don't really realize until you're in this position that it is quite hard then to secure yourself a permanent role. So everyone that is in their early career, don't fret. It's not just happening to you. It literally happens to everyone.
Everyone. And that
everyone goes through it.
Andrew and I can testify to that, and we're, let's say, a little older than Julia. And
well, and also, like, I mean, think about every episode that we've done has had someone who's had a very different path, you know, meandering in and out of shark science. Doesn't matter how long you've been doing it or how short you've been doing it. It's everybody has to go. Everybody doesn't have to go through it, but everybody tends to go through it just because the way that it's built. And I think you just have to be, and Julie, you can kind of attest this. You just have to be adaptive to the process and keep looking out and keep being like a bit stubborn at saying, hey, I'm not going to give up on this dream. I'm going to continue to do it. And that could be 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years or 3 years or more. But if you're stubborn enough, like I was, you know, you'll get in and you'll figure it out. Right. So I think that's great. I also think we're in, like, you know, Julia, you're at that age where you've seen some people really make a career, you know, through creating content and you know, and be able to have some of their bills kind of paid through that. Like, have you seen people do that, like within your own circles, or whether it be within shark science or other ways, so that you can, or have you thought about doing something like that as a way to pay the bills and also do the research that you want?
Yeah, I've not so much seen it in my own circles, but certainly extended circles. There's certainly people that I know have done that. I've been thinking about it actually a fair bit lately, not so much just in shark science, but I've got so many other passions like wildlife rescue, creating habitat, climate change, all of those kinds of things. So I have been thinking more about content creation lately, but it's just I think it's just such a hard thing to start doing because you're making yourself so vulnerable by putting yourself out there like that. So it's something that I'm thinking about, whether or not I'll get into it. That'll just be me having to be brave.
You know, I mean, it's true. Like, I know a lot of scientists who get into this and who do content creation, including myself. And you worry about what other scientists are going to think, and potential future employers, universities, institutes that you want to work with that may or may not have a good you know, outlook on social media and science communication. And especially the way it goes. You know, some people are very scientific and educational, and they'd like to talk about their science and keep it that way and stay out of sort of potential controversial takes, and keep it as professional as possible. And I feel like that kind of works a lot in a way. I think it's when you get sort of the opinions and political controversies where that could go either way, with an institute, but I mean, we're in a creator economy worldwide where it's like, I think in the US it was like $3.5 billion people made from the creator economy. Now, obviously that's not all science content creators, but I think there is an increase in that. I think we're starting to see that. And I think it just goes with personality and putting yourself out there and being able to share and knowing that, to be honest, that's just as good of a career as any, and you can still do your science, if you can fund your own science, then that'd be great. I feel like that's where a lot of people are going to try. And I feel like we need to put together some workshops to be able to have people, understand like what that takes, from people who are already doing it, if they're willing to share and stuff like that. So I think that becomes an interesting aspect of sharing and being transparent of what it's really like. And the difficulties and the challenges, right?
Yeah, and I think it's almost like a responsibility that we have as highly informed, educated people to share information that is actually factually correct. And because there are so many people out there that cannot say that of themselves.
True, well, that's so true.
Well, I say the biggest hurdle, and it's still even today with all the social media stuff, there's been like throughout my career, is that people being able to communicate to the average person, because not everybody's a scientist, not everybody's had statistics or chemistry or whatever, or knows the jargon. And too often, we've had this talk before is with other people on the show, but you've got to be people that can communicate in simple layman's terms to people. You're going to have far more impact than if you throw around a lot of the scientific jargon, because what I'm talking about. Andrew knows what I'm talking about. But the average person has no idea, because they didn't do science. They did something else and stuff. And so I think communicating to the average person I don't mean talking down to them or making it simple, but just talk to them in layman's terms, really.
Yeah.
And it's the only real way that we're going to start actually having impact. We do the science, but if we're only communicating it to other scientists, we're never going to have actual people on country on board and knowing what to
do.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I got to ask you here just one more another question here before we go, is like, what, so you just came back from Sharks International. I know we saw each other there, but how that was your first Sharks International, correct? What was your impression? What was it like?
I loved it. It was a little overwhelming because there was so many people.
800, I heard.
Yeah, 850. It was crazy.
850, wow.
So it was definitely the biggest conference that I've ever been to. And for me, it was like a roller coaster of emotions. I feel like probably other early career people were probably in the same boat, where some days you're feeling like really motivated and you know what steps to take next. And then other days you're like, wow, all these people are doing really cool stuff and I'm currently just doing nothing. But all in all, it was, I've come back refreshed and I've met heaps of people and I have ideas of what I can be doing. And just being able to be there and like hear from people who normally wouldn't really be able to get their voice out there. It was amazing. I learned heaps. Had the best time.
Awesome.
That's great. Well, Julia's been terrific having you on the show again, and we'll have to make sure it's not we don't wait another 3 years or so to have you back on.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, thanks for coming on. Do you have any final comments? Anything?
I don't think so. Yeah. Just thanks for having me back.
Yeah, Thank you for coming on, and congratulations again.
Congratulations.
And, next time we'll have you on, I'm sure we'll be talking about all the wonderful things you've been doing in the meantime, and we appreciate all the work you do and going out into...
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Going out into the unknown where some people will not go, and being able to study these amazing sharks in these amazing environments. So we really appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us.
Yeah, and I just give I give one last plug. Like, check out the episode with Julia on the river sharks on my YouTube channel, Lost Shark Guy, searching for lost sharks, extinct or alive.
All right.
Thanks, Julia.
Thanks, Julia. Appreciate it.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you, Julia, for joining us on today's episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. Dave, what did you think? Like, coming from, somebody you met, somebody you worked with, in the environment while she's doing her PhD. It must be nice to see her not only achieve the PhD, but to be able to discover a new population of sharks. That's pretty cool. Like that's a pretty big thing. Like when you've just first starting out your career, right?
Well, yeah, no, as I kind of said during the episodes, like, she worked on something, or her really, thanks to her advisor, Pete Kind, she worked on something nobody else really worked on. There's been a few people, Pete was really the pioneer in the whole field as far as with those river sharks, and really laid the groundwork. And she came in and took over the project that Pete was running. And of course, Pete was her supervisor. But, it really kind of like was working with these little known species. And as she said, she was going places where most people won't go, because it's a hard, and I've been there, it's a hard environment to work into. We talked a lot about the crocodiles in the episode, but you've got other things. It's a harsh environment. There's just not a lot of amenities there. If you get into trouble, there's really nobody coming. Even though you're in Australia, there's really no one coming right away for help. You got to be self-sufficient. Sure. You got to kind of always be aware of what's going on. And she definitely has that gene to want to do that. And you just see it with her research.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty incredible to be able to see that and to be able to be a part of that. And for her, like, she seems like she's following in your footsteps, your career footsteps, she's interested in taxonomy. She's interested in searching for these lost sharks and in representing those sharks that are not really represented or not much known about. I feel like that's a really interesting career to follow, but there's some challenges with that, right, Dave? Like there's, funding is difficult to look for that. And for those who are, as we give we've always give that advice of like looking for something new and discovering something new. How does that work with funding when funding is not often found? Like, how do you make a case for looking for something new in the funders? You've done it before. Yeah. How do you do that? And how do a lot of these younger people do that?
It's the easy route is just to take something where they're funding. The more difficult route, which is what I've taken, you just grovel around you just pull a little bit here, a little bit there. I was fortunate to got on, I've been connected with the Save Our Seas Foundation, which is huge in terms of supporting this type of research. This current thing telling the story about these lost sharks, it was really amazing. And doing the storytelling thing, as I've mentioned, for me is kind of a new area, but it's a new skill, new thing I've been learning about, is working with you and working with Denise Sotomayor. But I also want to say, like, the people I have in there to feature, like Julia here, Adriana Pastana, who's been on the podcast, also Naya Simone, who's be on the next episode. They weren't just sort of random people. These are people that I know, and I know they have that little flair for looking for little known lost shark species. And so they were kind of people they're people I kind of knew from, just through my just travels and everything. And so they were kind of like, I wanted to work with them because I knew they'd do a good job. And so that was really kind of, they already had that flair for that lost shark exploration thing. And so it was good working with them. And Julie was terrific to work with in the field, as well as Adriana and Naya.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it was a great episode. I really loved it. It was great to catch up with Julia. We'll definitely catch up with her again. And we thank Julia. We'll put her socials in the show notes so you can get a hold of that. But we want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean. Never mind. But before we go, Dave, if people want to get a hold of you, how would they do so?
Go to, you can find me at Lost Shark Guy on Instagram, and please go to the YouTube channel at Lost Shark Guy. Please check out the series Searching for Lost Sharks, Extinct or Alive, episode 5, The River Sharks, features Julia. Please subscribe if you like the content, and there will be more content coming soon.
And of course, if you want to interact with us at any point, you can also go to the Beyond Jaws pod on not only on YouTube, but also on Instagram. We'd love to hear from you on these episodes. We're already getting comments from your last episode about what people want to hear. So that'll be a lot of fun when we do that in the future. But thank you very much for joining us, everybody. This has been another wonderful episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.